I have a feeling that the question that Mike just left with is a perfect segue into this presentation. Not that we're going to answer all the questions, but I think it's clearly related. So what I really want to talk about is about reanalysis as an operational service and what that means and what it's worth. And that's what I want to talk about. If you want to know what it means, just think about forecasting, numerical weather forecasting. That's an activity that grew from research 50 years ago maybe into a set of services, operational services that people can rely on and that they know that they will be there and they will be based on high quality information. And that's not the case for climate. I mean, most people, well, probably everybody in this room knows how to access reanalysis data and what to do with them, but there are many other types of climate data. They're all over the place. And typically it's only the scientists and sometimes the scientists who actually created the data sets who know how to use them. And with all these applications emerging, there's need for really bringing reanalysis at least to that same kind of level of operational service. Now, we now have in Europe the Copernicus Climate Change Service, which is implemented by ECMWF, and that's a step in the right direction. It's trying to do the same thing of making accessing climate information easier, quality control of climate information, and also while talking to users. And reanalysis is definitely the flagship of C3S, the most used data set for many different applications. But it's also very expensive to develop and produce and then follow up with user support and also developing the next reanalysis and so on. It's very expensive, and so we have to constantly show that we're actually producing value for money, at least to the funders. In this case, it's the European Commission, program managers in those commission, and they need to be convinced of that. And it's not a one-time exercise, it's something that has to happen all the time. So, for that reason, C3S commissioned a study of socioeconomic benefits of ERA 5. And there's a report that came out. It's not quite available yet. It will be in a few weeks on the website of C3S. And what they did is very interesting. It's a long study and a long document, but they try to do value assessments for 10 major use cases. 10 is a sort of an arbitrary number. In this case, there are many other use cases, but these are use cases that we know well and that are important. And what they try to do by research and especially interviews with users and producers of reanalysis, and they looked at value in several respects. So economic value, of course, would be great if we could say ERA 5 saves the economy or is worth, in that sense, $1 billion or something. It's not easy to do that or justify it, but you can definitely justify that it's valuable in an economic sense, and that the value is much larger than the cost. And so that's really the purpose of this document. So I should say I'm not one of the authors. It was produced by a consultant firm. What is it? Evenflow, and they also interviewed people who were in the room, including myself and Hans and several other people. So they looked at economic value, as I mentioned, but also other benefits, environmental benefits from use of reanalysis in different sectors, regulatory or policy benefits, innovation, so companies that start business based on reanalysis and science, of course, that we all know, and other societal benefits. So they used these use cases, and I think I should have picked another one as an example, because we talked about it most of the morning and afternoon also, offshore wind energy in Europe. But it's interesting the focus that they took. They looked at capital cost for development of wind farms, and that's very expensive. You can imagine, before you generate any energy, you have to design and locate and build this wind farm. So they need loans, large ones, and investors, and those investors want some certainty about the yield. So that's directly related to the input information they use from Reanalysis. In Europe, that's typically ERA 5. And they showed in the study that if you increase the accuracy by 20% for those variables, the financing cost is about 2 to 3% lower, which makes sense because, you know, the investors do a risk assessment and set an interest rate based on that, and the benefit of that is in the order of 30 million euro per year. So that's a lot, and that's just one aspect. The way that they looked at it, as I mentioned, there are also other benefits that are, you know, science benefits and innovation and economic and regulatory, you know, achieving a policy goal and so on. So these are all the kinds of benefits that they discussed in this case. So you see this matrix here. This is how they went about it for each of these 10 cases. They picked a specific focus and then looked at basically the value chain and also from left to right, let's say, the processing chain. So that's something that maybe not everybody, well, certainly for wind farm, you know by now everything about it because you heard so many of these talks, but for also in other use cases, there tends to be a chain of processing levels before the use is actually made and pays off. So that's why they use this kind of matrix method to do this. Another interesting example, of course, is the AI use. So the fact that Reanalysis is the main source of training data for AI weather forecast models, and ERA 5 in particular has been used so far. And what happens, of course, is that you now get very skillful models, AI-based models that run extremely fast, and they're very easy to employ, and that really raises a lot of opportunities. They can be adapted to different applications and locations and so on. You see in the box how easy it is to get one of these models from ECMWF, for example, and there are lots of free data to do this. So that's, of course, opening all kinds of possibilities. And in particular, for disaster response and emergency management, usually forecast models are used, especially if it has to do with extreme weather, of course, are used to inform people and do, you know, make preventative measures to reduce damage and loss of life and so on. And there is an estimate quoted here from another publication that the AI market for disaster response and emergency management was estimated to be $115 billion, sorry, in 2020. Makes a big difference, a couple of zeros. Okay. So that's a large amount, and it doesn't mean that that's all due to the use of ERA 5, obviously, but you can see what kind of numbers you're talking about when you talk about economical value. And of course, the societal variable in this case is also very large. Here's their value chain in this particular case, which is based on ForecastNet. and specific situations. I won't go into the details right now. So these are the use cases on the left side of this matrix. Or you see, well, the wind farms we talked about, energy efficiency in electrical grids, AI we talked about, agriculture, crop grow models. We heard a little bit about that this morning, I believe. Public health initiatives related to heat waves, water management, we heard about that today. The tourism sector, science, of course, that's our favorite, perhaps. And in particular, they focus there on the role of ERA 5 and IPCC, which is growing. Public awareness, I see all the time now in the major newspapers quoting ERA 5 data for what's happening with the climate, so that's important. And then the last one is actually the first one, because that's really where Reanalysis began, developing of NWP, but that's still the case. I mean, national meteorological services like in Denmark, they have their own models, limited area reanalysis and so on, and they need global reanalysis to do that. So all these use cases that we just heard about and are treated in this study need to be supported by reanalysis. So what is really needed? So this was really the question I think that Mike posed. And this is a list that essentially defines what operational reanalysis really means. So you need to have open access to data that's reliable and timely. Reliable is very important. You want to be able to invest on it. You need to know that it will always be there. It doesn't just stop from one day to the other because the research grant is up, finished. User engagement and user support, we talked about that a lot. It's very important, but it needs to be organized. It's great to have meetings like this and conversations and workshops here and there, but that's still very ad hoc, and there needs to be a process for that, and it needs to be funded. You need to have people for doing this. So there is a lot of that kind of going on in C3S. I almost forgot the most important one, evaluation and quality control. So there has to be some quality assessment and quality assurance for users. They need to know that these data have been checked, that they're correct, they are what they should be, and that there is information that they can use about data quality in a sort of scientific sense, uncertainties. And they need to know that in the context of the kind of application that they do, because depending on the application, people have very different needs. I mean, for example, trends in reanalysis, in some applications it's enough to know that there is a trend and that it's a warming trend. But in others, you need to have very precise projections for regional warming or other climate signals. So these requirements really depend on the user and the use case. So you can see there's a lot of work involved in, on the one hand, doing this quality assure and assessment for the data sets, and also to the users, talking to the users of what they really need to know to be able to pick the right one. For example, there's 10 different reanalysis products. There are many CDRs from satellite data. What is fit for their purpose? Yeah, sorry, I'm almost finished. And then the final point is sustainable supply chains. So think of it like a business. The supply is data rescue, reprocess data sets, input data, and also the research for the models to improve the models and so on. That should also be cared for. If your supply stops, we all know what happens in the economy, and it's the same with reanalysis. And then finally, all of this requires institutional and international collaboration. So the WMO initiative is an example of that. But people need to be paid to have time to build that. Otherwise, it's just a shell, and that's not really helpful. So that's it. This is the last slide for me. I want to say that reanalysis is used much more than science and NWP development, but we know that by now. And the value comes from different types of benefits. The economic value is difficult to estimate for all these use cases, but it is very important to try to do that because that's what the funders really are looking for. Yeah, so I showed some pieces, small bits from that study. It's very interesting. I hope you download it one of these days and take a good look at it. And as I said, the economic value is not really estimated very accurately, but it is very obvious that it's larger than its cost. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.